Cricket Life Stories with me, Neel Khagram, and today we're joined by James Franklin. James, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah,
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
No worries.
So, born in Wellington, New Zealand. Tell me how it all started.
Well, I guess my parents, and they still actually live in the same house that I grew up in, which is right next to a cricket ground called Anderson Park, which is the home to a Wellington club, cricket club called Wellington Collegians. And every day in the summer, I'd be pretty much down at that park. Even in the winter, when there was no cricket on, I'd always be down there kicking a football around or whatever on my bike. Anderson Park's right amongst these sort of botanical gardens of Wellington, so it's a great area for a kid to grow up. So every day through the summer, I'd always be down at this cricket club, hitting a ball or helping out, and I was probably a bit of a pain in the backside. I think there was a lot of obviously senior men's teams down there, and they sort of took me under their wing as sort of, I guess, a bit of a mascot or a young lad that was keen and loved the game, and they'd always hit little catches to me or give me little throwdowns, and in return I'd sort of have to chase the ball or just help out around the club where I could, and I guess that's where everything was born. My father was a very avid cricket fan, and I guess my parents always made sure that I'd get to games on Saturdays, and they sort of fostered that love as well for the game right from an early age. So cricket was accessible to me, it was on my doorstep, and I guess that's where it all started.
So in New Zealand, there's a lot, of importance placed on rugby.
Yeah.
So I've seen you today, you're a big lad. That never really took your fancy, it was always cricket?
Yeah, I played football really, and again, the local football team for me was a club called Waterside Karori, which was sort of 10 minutes up the road from where I lived, and I had a group of mates that all played football. Sure, there were young lads that played rugby, but at that time, sort of through the late 80s, a lot of kids did play football to start with, and then sort of at 10, 11, 12 they would sort of transition over to rugby, and I tried that. I played 1 year of rugby, but I just didn't enjoy it. I played fullback, I never got the ball. I didn't mind being tackled, but I hated tackling. And I just found the enjoyment of football far greater, so I returned to playing football, and I was in a good club team for football. We did well, and there was a lot more enjoyment with that for me. But cricket was always the main focus, and football, I was okay at it, but it was a way, I guess, of keeping fit for cricket. And I played football right up until the age of sort of 18. Through school years, I went to Wellington College in Wellington there, and once I got to 18, I sort of, I left school and I was straight into a New Zealand Cricket Academy where, life as a professional cricketer kind of started for me.
And talk me through that kind of period at 18. How did you find that transition? Oh,
I loved it. School was great, and I did okay at my school grades. I was not an amazing student. But again, through my schooling years, I had a great headmaster, a guy called Roger Moses, who again was a passionate sporting fan. So he was always keen for his sporting teams in his school to do very well. And I guess being at a school like Wellington College, which in New Zealand is, it's got a proud sporting history amongst all the other sort of big schools in New Zealand. It's always done well at rugby, cricket, football, hockey, various other sports. So I was lucky that I was able to attend that school, and again, through the headmaster chasing sports and wanting to pursue that and doing well at it, it was always sort of, he was always pushing that, as well as obviously the academic side. And my peer group at school were a bunch of good sports players, whether it was in cricket or football. So there was always that constant competitiveness amongst each other,
Sure.
and drive to be a good sporting team as well as good players. So when it came time to leave school, I had the opportunity to attend the New Zealand Cricket Academy, and to rewind a bit, I've been involved in the New Zealand under-19 cricket team,
Yeah.
sort of my second to last year at school when I was sort of 17, and and my last year at school when I was sort of 17 going on 18. So I'd already sort of been identified a little bit by New Zealand cricket as a player that they wanted to, I guess, invest.
Fast track?
Yeah, or maybe just invest in. I'd been around the Wellington age group teams ever since I was sort of 10 or 11 as well, starting from sort of under 13s or under 14s. And yeah, as I said, got involved in the New Zealand under 19 side as a later in my sort of college later years, 16, 17, and then got a letter in the post to ask if I was interested in turning up to the New Zealand Cricket Academy in my first year out of school, which obviously absolutely leapt at the opportunity. I'd already played a couple of games for Wellington in terms of first class cricket. So I left school, we leave school in sort of late November, early December in New Zealand, sort of runs or aligns with the calendar year. So I left school and I sort of was straight away sort of involved with New Zealand under 19s for the rest of that summer, a little bit of stuff with Wellington up until sort of the end of March, and then went into the New Zealand Cricket Academy, which was a resident placing down in a place called Lincoln University, which is just outside of Christchurch. And we get together from early April, so the end of the cricket season in New Zealand, and you live in there for 6-7 months.
Oh wow! Okay.
So you train pretty much Monday to Friday.
Eat, sleep, breathe it.
Yeah, eat, sleep, breathe it, and there'll be a lot of other stuff around just the actual cricket playing side. If you wanted to do a course at university, you could. Not too many guys uptook on that, which was a little bit naive of us. And yeah, it was just an environment again which pushed you. You started to develop habits of what being a professional sports person was all about. Things like nutrition, strength and conditioning, relentlessly having to turn up every day and train. I guess that year was quite important for me, just in terms of learning the behaviours and patterns of what it was to be a professional sports person.
And I did mention their fast track. I did say that because you made your ODI debut at the age of 20.
Yeah.
Did you feel you were ready? I know there was injuries, and they've obviously spotted a talent in yourself. Did you feel as if it was the right time?
No, I don't think it was the right time. In reflection, I think I was definitely selected too early. I went on a trip to India with the New Zealand Cricket Academy when I was about 19. It was sort of the year after I'd been involved in the New Zealand Cricket Academy, so the next year they still had academy sides going off during the winter, and then New Zealand wanted to play on tours to again try and develop and, as you say, fast track some players and bridge that gap between, I guess, domestic cricket and international cricket. And you see that a lot now with England Lions tours, New Zealand A-team tours from all the countries really. So this was one of those trips, and Sir Richard Hadley was the manager. He happened to be at the time a selector for New Zealand, or the head selector, and his brother Dale Hadley was coaching that side. And I had a good tour. I did well, and I think he kind of saw a talent there that may or may not work for international cricket straight away, and I got picked. And I'd probably only played maybe, I don't know, a handful, maybe 10 first class games, and had done nothing. And I got picked in the New Zealand side for a test match actually on my home ground, a Boxing Day test against Zimbabwe. I didn't actually make the final 11. And then it was bizarre. During that test match I went away to play for Wellington in a one-day game. And I turned up and I was made 12th man for that game for my domestic team, which I was obviously disappointed with, but then came back to the test match to be sub-fielder for the last couple of days and just be in that environment. And then I got picked for the New Zealand one-day team straight after that test match. And I remember Adam Perori, who was the wicketkeeper at the time, came up to me and shook my hand and said, I bet you're really confused now, because I couldn't make my domestic one-day team, but I was being picked for the New Zealand one-day team for a series of games against Zimbabwe following that test match. And I ended up playing, I think, all 3 games and did okay, and then got picked for New Zealand for next sort of 18 months.
Yeah, so the ODI debut, that was in 2001?
Yeah, so I was just 20. I was literally 20 in a couple of months. So I was pretty young and fresh. You know, I think we see at the moment, and what are we? We're early November 2019. We're seeing the likes of Tom Benton being picked for England as 20-year-old, and I look at him and I think back to where I was, and you know, he's so far ahead of where I was as a 20-year-old, and you know, some players are naturally ready at a younger age, and some aren't. Some, you know, are ready at 25 or 28. It's all different. But definitely for me, I was not ready.
And then you made your Test debut a year later.
I think a few months later. Yeah, I think a few months later. Off the top of my head, I think.
Against Pakistan?
Against Pakistan. So that summer in New Zealand, we played Zimbabwe, and then I think Sri Lanka came and played, and then Pakistan were the headline tour. So our headline tour in New Zealand is generally February, March, and Pakistan came out, and yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, for me, again, being a 20-year-old, and this is what I mean by not being ready. I was playing against these opposition like almost in awe, because as a kid, I'm growing up, and all of a sudden,
all on TV.
I'm playing against Waka Yunus and Wazim Akram and Saeed Anwar and these sorts of guys, the Flower Brothers, you know, Jay Saria, Murali, and I'm going, wow, this is so cool. I'm actually lining up against them rather than actually thinking about how I'm going to compete.
Yeah.
So yeah, I made my Test debut against Pakistan.
Were you picked mainly as a bowler?
I was, yeah. At this stage, I was, and
was I asked, because with the bat, I know it didn't turn out too well on your debut. You got a pair.
Thanks for reminding me.
Sorry,
no, yeah, it was. I was actually on a king pair. I got out for a golden duck on my first ever innings in Test cricket. Saqlain Mushtaq got me with his famous Duzra first ball. Which
not a bad guy to get out to. If you are to, you gotta get out to someone first up.
Yeah, and then so. Yeah, I got dropped after that first test. I think I only took one wicket in the test match. It was at Eden Park. Then the next test, I think off the top of my Saqlain Mushtaq might have got actually 100 in that test, which was, they're playing on an absolute road at Christchurch. And then I came back in for the third test at Hamilton and did well. Actually, I think I might have got 6 wickets in that test match, and was back in the frame there, and felt all of a sudden, you know, you get a performance and you kind of feel like, okay, right, this might now be the start of things. And then, yeah, we finished the summer, so we won that test match, so we finished the summer on a good note. And then I think we had a trip. I think we had a trip to Pakistan that we were meant to go to. Or Sharjah or somewhere, and I didn't play that well. Came back for the winter for New Zealand, and then I was in and out of the team for probably sort of the next year, and never really quite nailed it. Again, just sort of thinking more about who I was playing against rather than actually getting in the fight of the game.
So as you say, things did stagnate between that period, and I just want to fast forward to 2004 and England.
Yeah.
So you come over and you're playing in the Lancashire leagues, whilst the actual first team, test team are actually competing against England. Was that kind of a strategic thing that you thought, maybe if I play here, get used to the conditions, or was it just an opportunity to play in your winter?
I guess it was a bit of both, really. I'd spent sort of the previous couple of years out in the New Zealand team, which was really good for me in terms of developing my game and getting to understand form and the ins and outs of that, and dealing with that mentally, and also just working on my own game in the less pressurised environment, I guess, of New Zealand first class cricket. And so I really did develop my game, and I felt more confident with my game, and I went to England for the first time in that 2004 off the back of a pretty good season for Wellington back in the New Zealand domestic scene. And I mean, it might have been part strategic because I knew that I had a good season, that if I went to England, New Zealand were touring there, you never know, injuries could happen and there might be an opportunity. But it was also, I'd never been to England to play cricket, so I was quite excited about, coming here as a 23-year-old and seeing what the English...
See what the swing is all about, left arm swing?
Yeah. So I came over, I played a couple of months of league cricket up in Lancashire for a club called Rushden, which was good fun, and then New Zealand were here, and so they knew I was over. I went and trained at a couple of practices of theirs. I think I was at Headingley before the second test, and they got a couple of injuries around about that time. And so I got called into the New Zealand Test squad for the last test as cover initially, but then all of a sudden between the second and third test it unfolded that a couple of guys just weren't going to be fit.
And you performed.
Well, and I'd obviously
took your chance.
Yeah, and I'd obviously,
that's what sport's all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I obviously bowled right in the nets previous in the second test to whoever were the decision makers, and got a chance and did okay. We lost that test at Trent Bridge, that last test, against a very good England team, an England team that was really building into the team that ultimately went on to win the Ashes the following year in 2005, which I think everyone that follows cricket will remember fondly as one of the great test series of all time.
But a 6 for, not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I got 6 wickets in that game at Trent Bridge, and I guess my second coming as an international cricketer, and through those injuries as well, it meant some players couldn't play in the one-day series to follow, so I got drafted into that and did all right in that. New Zealand did well. We won that triangular, I think, with the West Indies in England.
So I've seen some stats here, 5 for 42 at Durham.
Yeah, I got my PB in international one-day cricket bowling at Durham in that series, and that was a springboard for probably my best 2 or 3 years to follow in international cricket.
I was going to say, yeah, so you did play 31 tests, 110 one-dayers, but is this where you really felt you belonged then? Yeah,
and I had a coach that really backed me, John Bracewell, who was New Zealand coach at the time and went on to coach New Zealand for 4 or 5 years, really backed me. And also the captain, Stephen Fleming, at the time was I guess a fan of mine and what I could offer the team, and I got their full backing to go out there, and that gave me confidence as a player. Also the confidence I had built in myself as well from being out of the team for a couple of years and working on my game. It sort of all came together, and through that mid-2000s I probably had my best 2-3 years of international cricket.
And how much of was a highlight, that hat-trick you took against Bangladesh?
Yeah. I mean, again, I get asked.
At the time, the second New Zealander.
I get asked every now and again, about that crazy 5 minutes, and that's kind of how I explain it. Is that it's all a bit of a blur now. I can't really remember too much of it because it happened so fast. I mean, if you asked me who the batsmen were, I couldn't actually tell you. And it's just one of those things that freakishly can happen to anyone if everything aligns in terms of if you're bowling in international cricket, and I just got lucky.
And you did mention Stephen Fleming there.
Yeah.
Was he the best captain?
For me, yeah.
Throughout your career?
Yeah, for me he was, and I think he said...
How influential was he on New Zealand cricket as a whole?
Oh, massively, because I think if you move forward from when Steve retired, I think he definitely influenced the likes of Daniel Vittori, who took over the captaincy, and then Brendan McCullum. They definitely had their own spin on it in terms of how they wanted to skin it, but I think Stephen definitely left an impression on those guys with their leadership, and I think where New Zealand is at the moment, I think also harks back to how Stephen went about running the team, his tactics, his leadership. I think he's definitely a guy that he doesn't like to take too much credit on stuff, but I think he's definitely a guy that my generation would say had a massive impact on New Zealand cricket.
Must have been special then to get your maiden Test 100 batting alongside him.
Yeah. And
you've got a stand of like 200 together, didn't you?
Yeah.
With a great man at the other end.
Yeah, I mean, he's he's widely regarded in New Zealand cricketing circles as one of the best batsmen that we've ever produced. I think frustratingly for him, he probably didn't score as many international hundreds as he would have liked, but there was never any doubt about, he was our premier batsman as well as being our captain. And yeah, I think any cricket follower would genuinely tune in to watch Steve Fleming bat because just the elegance that he went about it. He was a terrific player. So for me to get my maiden Test 100 with him at the other end was great because he also became a good friend. We actually lived around the road from each other and we spent quite a bit of time. We played together for Wellington and obviously spent a lot of time through those mid-2000s playing for New Zealand together, so we actually became quite good mates. So it was nice to be out there. I saw him as a bit of a mentor in terms of my own batting, so it was nice to be out there with him, putting on a cool partnership against a pretty good South African team.
Yeah, I was going to say, the attack must have comprised of the likes of Ntini,
Dale Steyn. Yeah. I mean, it was good.
Walker must have been there.
I don't think so. I think it was Andre Neel.
And not bad.
Yeah, I mean, it was again I think I got dropped a couple of times, and it was a pretty good batting wicket. I think South Africa came out to bat after we did and piled the runs on. So it wasn't a green seamer that was tricky. Let's put it that way. So.
122 in the books.
yeah. Look, and frustratingly for me and maybe a few people that follow my career, I was never able to really do that again for whatever reason. I look back and I definitely should have scored a lot more runs than I did in my international career.
What do you think was the reason that you didn't? Was it mental?
Yeah, maybe there's a mental side to it that I through this period of time where I felt my international career was going really well, I got a bad knee injury after sort of the 2007 World Cup, where I felt I was really on top of my game and I was really starting to have an impact for New Zealand, and I was feeling confident about what I was doing. I spent probably about 18 months out of the international game dealing with an injury, trying to get fit again. And
how did that injury come about?
Just wear and tear, really. I had a couple of dodgy knees that needed some attending to, and one thing led to another, and it actually ended up being far worse than what we kind of thought. So I had a knee operation, and the recuperation was pretty much 9 to 12 months.
Do you think you were ever the same player again?
I wasn't the same bowler. I wasn't, and not for lack of trying. I know that a lot of my mates used to give me ribbing for being not the most forthcoming bowler going around. I always preferred batting, but I always tried as hard as I could with my bowling when I did get the ball in my hand, and I just wasn't able to generate the same pace as what I had prior to the knee injury. So I just wasn't able to get quite back to that level. I came back into the New Zealand side, but after Bracewell left as a coach, we had a little bit of chopping and changing with our coaches through probably 2008 to sort of 2012, when Mike Hesson eventually took over, and then when he came back in, there was a lot more stability around the team. But that gap between sort of 2008 and 12, I think we had three coaches that they've all got their own opinion and their own take on players, and I was kind of a fringe player at that time.
You're still involved in the major tournament, the World Cup.
Yeah, I was
the team that got to the semi-final.
Yeah, I was still
in 2011.
Yeah, I was still involved, but I was very in and out, and my role would change quite a lot.
It must be difficult as a player.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to play. I wanted to be part of the squad, so I didn't really. And I wasn't in a position to demand where I batted or where I bowled. I was, as I said, I was a peripheral player around, I guess, a core group of performers. And with, changing of coaches, they obviously have different opinions on players, and for whatever reason, I just didn't quite fit in with these coaches all the time. And my own performances probably didn't also mean that I had to be in the team. Like, I never really nailed it down when I came back after that knee injury. So it was all a bit of a frustrating period, really.
So how would you summarise your Test and one-day career representing your country? A great honour, but do you feel you fulfilled your talent, or He was glad of the opportunity.
I think I flirted with it. If I'm brutally honest, I think I definitely showed glimpses of being a good player on the international stage, but I think I didn't quite fulfil what I could or what I should have. I definitely did it from a domestic point of view, and I had a lot of opportunities at international cricket, and I had a lot of great times and a lot of special moments, but I probably didn't quite nail it.
And what was the most special moment playing for New Zealand? You could pick one.
Oh, look, there's individual moments that you have, but I've always said that the best moments for me playing for New Zealand were the Test match wins that we had. They were always great moments. When you get that last wicket or someone scores the winning runs, to win a Test match for me was always the ultimate feeling, the ultimate satisfaction. Sure, taking wickets, scoring runs, having milestone performances are great along the way. But for us at that time, when I was in the New Zealand team, Test match wins were few and far between. Let's put it that way. We certainly knew that we could compete, but everything had to come together, and we had to really work hard for Test match wins. And whenever we got them, I would say that they were always the most memorable moments for me playing for New Zealand.
So, when you look back at your New Zealand career, how much of an influence was the great Richard Hadlee? An all-rounder yourself?
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question.
Look, I think as a kid growing up in New Zealand in the 80s, he was obviously the kingpin along with Martin Crowe of New Zealand cricket. So, left a massive impression on me as a guy to try and aspire to be kind of like. It was always going to be lofty to try to replicate, but certainly because he was on the TV all the time and doing what he did, it sort of certainly inspired you as a kid to go out there and want to play cricket. And then you fast forward sort of 10, 12 years, and all of a sudden I'm a late teenager trying to become a professional cricketer, and he's a team manager of a team for a tour was pretty cool. And he'd always offer little tidbits here and there, and you knew if you got a pat on the back from Sir Richard that you'd done a good job. And as I said, at that time when I was breaking into the New Zealand team, he was head of selectors, and was involved in selection for a number of years with New Zealand cricket. And when tough messages were there to be delivered, he would always do that. But equally, he would always congratulate you and, as I said, pat you on the back when you did well. So to get that sort of recognition and foster that little bit of a relationship with one of the legends of the game, not only in New Zealand but worldwide, was a great experience.
And then fast forward back to your career, 2015, you joined Middlesex. There's a World Cup going on in parallel around the period.
Yep.
At home,
yeah.
Did you feel that you missed out on an opportunity to play in a home World Cup? Or was it a case where you felt you just weren't going to get that opportunity?
Yeah, I wasn't going to get that opportunity, and I kind of 18 months prior I'd been involved with the New Zealand team. Mike Hesson had come in as coach in mid-2012, and he actually rang me. He got hold of me. I was playing for Essex at the time as an overseas in the T20. I was doing IPL stuff with Mumbai Indians and going okay at that, and I was starting to think at that time, so I was sort of 31 years of age. I was kind of thinking at that time whether or not to pursue something over here in England. I'd had an Irish passport. I wasn't really involved with the New Zealand team. Things were going well from a franchise cricket point of view. I was starting to think that was where my sort of next sort of 5 years back in my career was starting to lie. And I got this phone call out of the blue from Mike Hesson, and he sort of said, I'd like you to be back involved. I want you to get you back involved with the New Zealand team, and there's definitely going to be more stability and consistency with your selection. We're going to give you a good crack at this. So, I was chuffed a bit. So we had a pretty simple conversation that we'd always try and call a spade the whole way through, and didn't want to be blindsided by anything, and we got on with it, and it was good, and I did okay through probably the next sort of 6 to 9 months. There was a lot of stuff going on in the background in New Zealand cricket at the time. Ross Taylor sort of had been dropped from captaincy, and Brendan McCullum took over, and there was a few political manoeuvres going on in the background, but I was just loving being back playing for New Zealand, and felt as though the environment was starting to be more stable in terms of a cricket point of view, in terms of selection. Came over to here in 2013 for a back end of a New Zealand tour to England. I wasn't in the tests, so I was involved in the one days that went on to play in a Champions Trophy, I think. And I had a shock. I had a terrible tour. I just couldn't buy a run, and it got to a point where I couldn't really be picked anymore. And I had a phone call from Mike Hesson after the tour, and it was around the time that New Zealand were contracting their players, the 20 players that they do annually, and he just rang and said, "Look, you're not going to get contracted."
How did that make you feel?
I was disappointed. I was, because you sort of rewind a year prior, and I'd had a phone call from him saying,
that's the question. Yeah.
And sort of, a year later, he's making a very different decision, and rightly or wrongly, that was the decision that was made. And
did you feel you had a bit more to offer?
Yes and no. I mean, I'd had a stinker of a tour, so I didn't have too many grounds to stand on in terms of fighting it. But I kind of knew at that time, it was sort of 18 months out from that World Cup, that if I wasn't going to get a contract for that next year, that they weren't really going to look at me for that World Cup. If I had got a contract on the back of poor performance, then I kind of would have felt that, okay, they're backing me for this World Cup, they're just going to ride this out. But Corey Anderson had just come on the scene, Grant Elliott was starting to go okay, and they were the horses that they backed, for want of a better analogy, and they ended up providing the goods through that period. They played very well, and New Zealand played very well, which obviously culminated in New Zealand making that World Cup final. So I knew then, when I had that phone call after that tour, that was kind of me done with New Zealand, and I was disappointed, but I wasn't going to kick cans. I knew I still had other things to offer in other parts of the world with cricket, and I was going to pursue those opportunities.
So you come over in 2015 here, you're quickly elevated to captain of Middlesex. Mm-hmm. You actually win the championship as well in 2016.
Yeah, so I mean, after that, I guess last sort of series with New Zealand, I went back and did a bit of franchise stuff. 2014 I did a stint here with Nottinghamshire, which is great. I was playing for Wellington back home, and had my bit between the teeth with a group of players there to try and win some trophies. We'd gone trophyless for a good decade in Wellington, so we had a good group of senior players that really wanted to win some trophies and start creating a winning habit in my province at Wellington. We were forever known as sort of chokers, so we started to do that there. So that was a big thing for me and the guys around me at Wellington. And then, as I said, came here, played some stuff in Nottinghamshire in 2014 as an overseas, and that was where I got a bit of a shoulder tap from Angus Fraser, who was the director of cricket at Middlesex. We'd played Middlesex at Lords, and he basically said, "Look, I hear you got an Irish passport. Would you be interested in?"
Who in your families?
Oh, my grandfather. So my grandfather Irish, grandmother English. They migrated to New Zealand in the 1920s, and through that I had the right to get an Irish passport. So I'd had that since I sort of was 12 years old. So I kind of always knew I had that up my sleeve. And so Gus tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Do you want to come over?" And I said, "Yep, I'm pretty keen. I just need to talk to the other half, who at that time was in New Zealand, and she'd always enjoyed coming over here when I played as an overseas player at various counties, and we just saw it as a good stepping stone to come and finish my career at obviously the home of cricket, which was a real privilege, but also that potentially once my cricket playing days had finished, London, UK was a good place to start post-cricket opportunities. New Zealand's a very small country and opportunities are fairly limited, so we kind of saw the great opportunity to play for Middlesex and the privilege of playing at the home of cricket, but also the bigger picture of life after cricket. So it was an absolute no-brainer to move over here in 2015.
And then when you actually did win the championship with Middlesex, talk me through that, the last match against Yorkshire, that contrived declaration. Looking back, I was reading wide reports, etc. You were widely supported actually with the decision you made, but just talk me through what you were thinking during that game.
Yeah, it was a mad game of cricket, really.
So 3 teams could have won the championship.
Yeah, 3 teams could have won, and
Middlesex, Yorkshire, both playing, and Somerset.
Yeah, so again, just to rewind to give some perspective on it, 2015 when I joined Middlesex, I was coming into a team that was building and had been building for a couple of years, and really developing to become a really strong 4-day championship team. I'd taken over the captaincy from Adam Voges, who'd been called up to the Australian team and was now very much part of the Australian test fabric and was doing well. So I assumed the captaincy and everything went well through that 2015 year. We finished second to Yorkshire. We played in some really great games against Yorkshire. They were always the best games to be part of when I was at Middlesex. The 4-day fixtures against them, they were the benchmark, but I think they felt when we played them, they were always very good contests, and I think we kind of always pushed them hard, and I think off the top of my mind, my time at Middlesex, we always had it over them in terms of results. So we went into the 2016 year having finished second the year before to Yorkshire, that we knew that we had to get everything right that year, and we had the team to do it, and we went through that season really challenging Yorkshire and keeping up with them the whole way through, drawing games when we probably should have lost them, winning games that we probably shouldn't have won, but that was the mentality of the side. It was
mark of a good side, isn't it?
Yeah, mark of a good team, and mark of individuals standing up in pressure moments. And yeah, it all came down to that last game at Lords. Somerset were in vying around us in Yorkshire, and probably that game at Lords, it was on Sky. It was all just the build up of the whole fixture itself, and we knew obviously that Somerset were playing Nottinghamshire, who were having a struggling season at that time, and we also knew that Somerset was starting to play some games with their wickets down at Taunton. So I think Yorkshire and us both felt that we wanted to, no matter what, make sure that one of us would be the champions, because we both felt that over sort of the couple of years that we were the teams that were the dominant teams in county championship cricket, and no matter what, we were going to play that game as hard as we could, but ultimately a team was going to win.
Get a result.
Yeah. And that's what it came down to once we got to the to that last afternoon, is that we chucked a few numbers around with each other, and it was we're going to the bitter end.
You left them around 40 overs, didn't you?
Yeah. So we had to work through that a little bit, but it was very much we're prepared to lose to ultimately win the whole thing, and that was certainly the opinion of the Middlesex group, and I know that was the same with the Yorkshire group, and it ended up being one of the great games in county championship history.
So how did that make you feel when Toby Rowland-Jones gets the hat-trick to win the championship? One of the proudest moments of your career?
Yeah, amazing.
As skipper?
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Just, again, I guess you reflect on it afterwards and it takes time to soak in, but for that group of guys it was so poignant that they got to win the title at Lords on the last day. As I said, they've been building up for years for that moment, and for Toby to ultimately get that last wicket. I think he got 10 wickets in the game. He'd been a huge leader for us amongst others. Massive moment, lots of people in Lords, maybe half an hour to go in the season. Just a magical moment for that group of players and this coaching staff as well, who'd been there for a number of years. Gus Fraser said that it had taken time for them to build up the team and the squad to this point in time, and it was just a magical moment.
And now moving forward to your coaching career, you're currently the head coach of Durham.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Out of the blue, really. I was sort of 2018 was my last contracted year with Middlesex as a player, and they were going down different avenues with players, so I wasn't really playing a lot. And it got to the end of the season, and I was done. And I was thinking, and I had been doing a little bit of assistant coaching work in a couple of franchise teams around the world, and I was thinking that probably for the next couple of years that I'd sort of skim my teeth, helping out and trying to get involved in franchise cricket as an assistant and building up a bit of a resume that hopefully by the time I was sort of 40 I could really go for a...
So that was always the aim, to become...
Yeah, and I think that was just going to be a natural progression from being a leader and a captain of, Middlesex and Wellington back in New Zealand. That was the big thing that sort of got me out of bed in the morning, was helping the coaches foster an environment and a culture to build teams that could challenge and win trophies. That's what got me for my last sort of 4 or 5 years of playing. Personal performances obviously were still there, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all. It was actually about winning games and as I said, getting a team into a position to win trophies. So that for me naturally sort of lent itself to coaching. So as I said, I thought I'd be involved or try to be involved with franchises, but I got this phone call out of the blue from Marcus North, who had just been appointed Director of Cricket up at Durham, and they were wanting to change things around a bit, and they'd sort of let...
Did you have a rapport with Marcus?
No, not at all. I mean, we were contemporaries, but we'd always sort of ran side to side. We'd actually never ever played against each other.
Okay.
He'd come to England a lot and played a lot of county cricket with various counties, had a successful career in Australia and played obviously for Australia and did well. But he got in touch and said, look, we've let go of our coach John Lewis. We're looking to bring in some fresh eyes. Would you be interested in a chat? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I had a chat with him and the new CEO Tim Bostock, and had a coffee meeting and laid it out on the table. And look, they weren't naive to the fact that I had no experience as a head coach. I'd just finished playing, but they've been prepared to back me. And knowing that there's going to be mistakes along the way. I don't know everything. I'm a human. I'm not perfect. But it's been good fun. I mean, Durham's had its own struggles over the last few years with penalties imposed financially and in a playing context. So they've had a lot of players leave over the last few years to other counties, and rightfully or wrongfully they've gone on and done well at these other counties. So that's left a bit of a gap at Durham. So now, Paul Collingwood's also, retired a year or so ago. So they're very much in a transition phase, and there's a lot of exciting players there, young players that when I got offered the job, I just saw as a real challenge and a real opportunity to go up there and try and help these young players develop and maybe impart a little bit of knowledge, but equally just have some fun and enjoy watching this group sort of come together and build Durham up again, because they've had a proud history, recent history as well, as a county that's challenged and done well in all forms of the game here in England. So that's where we ultimately want Durham to get over the next few years. So it's been an interesting first year on the job.
And the decision in that first year to make Cameron Bancroft the skipper, obviously he's had his problems with the ball tampering issue. You must have known that there would have been some negative connotations with that, but how was the decision made amongst yourself and the leadership group?
Yeah, look, you
must have seen something in him.
Oh, absolutely. He was signed as the overseas player before myself or Marcus even got our jobs at Durham. So he was coming, and Marcus obviously had a little bit of history with Cameron, both being from Western Australia and played a bit together when Cameron was a young player breaking through. And I came into the job in February 2019, and the season was only sort of 6 weeks away. So we had a lot of discussions behind the scenes about who was going to be captain. Paul Collingwood, as I said, had retired the previous season, so there was a gap there to fill, and it was sort of a process of elimination and what we were trying to look for in a leader and a captain. And we kept coming back to Cameron, and we knew that there would be a little bit of kickback with the appointment, with, as you say, the ball tampering scenario. But discussions that we had with Cameron, people in Western Australia, people in Australian cricket, about whether or not he would be the right person was always positive. He hadn't done it before, but we knew he had the right characteristics to come in and make a good fist of it. And it definitely took a couple of months. He came over and he didn't know anyone in the club. They didn't know him. It was always going to take a couple of months for that relationship and that trust to really grow and build, which is important when you're a captain and a leader. But certainly by the time he got recalled back to Australia for the recent Ashes series, he was starting to leave a very good impression and a hard impression on our playing group of being a consummate professional and a guy that could deliver performance under pressure and also expect performance from others. And we're looking forward to welcoming him back next season.
And how would you summarise your first season as coach?
It's been fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been busy. Obviously, when you're a player, you don't quite appreciate how much the coaches actually do behind the scenes. So, in England, the playing season is from April to the end of September, and generally as a player, once the start of October rolls around, you're kind of on holiday. But as a coach, it's been a busy October, reviewing and preparing for the winter training and obviously for next season. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it. As I said, when I was back into my career, what got me out of bed was all the sort of stuff that coaching now entails for me, and I find it a great challenge to plan and think about the next game, but equally think about the next few months and where the team could be in a year's time, and constantly having that tuning through your mind and talking to other coaches and Marcus North and in my circumstance the director of cricket. It's been really good, but equally just watching the development of some of our players. They've had far more opportunity this year up at Durham to go out and showcase what they're about, and we've seen some young players even come through this year. Scott Steele, Liam Travascus, Matthew Potts, Bryden Cass, to name a few, are some of the younger guys that have had greater opportunity this year and have shown that they're up to performing at the highest level in England apart from international cricket. So it's great to see.
And how do you look at the game as a whole now? Back home in New Zealand and here in England.
Yeah.
Do you think there's opportunities out there for youngsters?
Massive.
Back home, is the game healthy?
I think so. I mean, I've lost a little bit of touch with New Zealand cricket and specifically domestic cricket. I'm doing a little bit of work with Sky at the moment, and it's quite funny. I sort of ask questions behind the scenes, who are the young players coming through, and I honestly kind of answer, I don't actually know. But I think
the recent World Cup must have helped.
Yeah, definitely, and we saw that. I mean, I even felt that this year on a domestic level in England. Once that World Cup final was done, the uplift in cricket support, spectators was massive. Up at Durham, the T20 blast followed the World Cup, and we had our best attendances ever for a couple of games up there. It was record numbers for us. So I think that was felt right throughout England. So I think definitely cricket, with the emergence now of the 100 ball coming in next season, Hopefully getting more cricket onto sort of terrestrial TV and getting it to a wider audience. There's definitely going to be massive uplift, and I think, as you say, opportunity for younger players to come into the sport and see cricket as potentially a way to make money, to have a career in the game. It's exciting.
Well, James, really appreciate your time today. Fantastic career. All the best with the coaching coming up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much today.
No worries. Cheers.
Neel Khagram, Cricket Life Stories. James Franklin, thank you.
No worries.